those of you who know me, who've seen me very recently, handing me a mic is a very dangerous thing. But 1970s was a very crazy time, and I remember it very well. If you think back, is that the country was in shambles. We were coming to the end of the Vietnam War, and the long lines of gas. You have to wait online for that, and it was just a very tough time. We wondered what the future has, and then the terrible day came that the Beatles broke up. But in complete seriousness, in that time, my mother found herself with 4 children, raising them by herself in Kings Park. It was a very difficult time because she had no education, she had no work experience, and she had a house and 4 children. And she had to go from a dead start. And so when I look back at it with the experience I have now, I could see she had 3 priorities in her life. Number 1 was to get her education and get a job. Number 2 was to keep the house, because that was the only security we had, was keeping that house. And number 3 was to establish her own identity as a person. Now you might think now, we look back at times, through the prism, but back then, I remember seeing every letter that came to the house. It didn't say Mrs. Anita Weber, it said Mrs. my father's name. And when we look back at it now, it seems bizarre, but really it was. I remember my mother recounting several stories to me. I remember when she wanted to get a telephone in her own name. They wanted her to give a deposit. She had a telephone for 20 years. And it's not like she wanted to have Mrs. Anita Cody, which would have been fine, her maiden name, and today we wouldn't even think anything of that. And then it would also be fine if it was Miss Anita Cody Weber. It wasn't even that. She just wanted Anita Weber listed as the phone. And she would not give up. And you know what happened? They listed the phone in her name. Even right down the block here, I could point to the building, you could look out the building, you see the Kings Park Public Library. And right out there, she went to the library to get her name on the library card. And she had to fight for it, just to have Mrs. Anita Weber on there. Because they want to know how she would pay for it. If the kids, whatever, I'm sure we still doing time on a late book fee. But those were the battles that we faced. And it didn't end there. It was things like, I remember as a young kid, she didn't know the rules, but there's certain rules established. I remember I was terrible at baseball. Ralphie could attend to that. Me and Ralphie would be in the outfield picking donuts, picking daisies while the balls were over our head. And Uncle Vinny like, what are you guys doing out there? But the only sport I was worse at than baseball was basketball. And my mother would come to the basketball games, and I would never play. And she didn't understand that was the way it was. And so she would yell at the basketball coach, my son's going to play, my son's going to play. And the basketball coach would say, no, you have to battle for your time on the field. But she battled for it, and I played every basketball game to the detriment of our team, and I think I came in last place that year. But in all seriousness, it was very, very important because those were the battles she fought. I remember at Father and Son night down at Indian Head School, she was going to take me to Father and Son night. And they stopped her at the door and said, you couldn't go in. And she said, no, I'm taking my son to Father and Son night. And she created a big commotion. And know who came out? Uncle Vinny. Uncle Vinny heard the commotion, and he came out, and he convinced my mom, who was committed to take me in, so Uncle Vinny took me in. And it wasn't until many years later, it was very ironic to me, because my mom recounted several stories how Uncle Vinny lived just a couple of blocks over, and he was growing up without a dad, and my grandfather would take care of Uncle Vinny, and then take him out on places. So it kind of goes to show you the things that you do spin around back at life. And those were some of the things I remember most. And I remember when my mom finally got a job. It was like her first job real job that required her skills. And she got a credit card. She had a $500 credit limit on it. And the first thing she did, she went out and bought me a motorcycle. You know, and all the things that we could have done. You know, and I wondered why she did that. Because that, you know, over the years, like I wrenched on these motorcycles, they never worked. And I think, you know, I look back at it, she felt bad because at times it was very difficult for us because we were really broke for a while. I mean, really broke. And you know, a lot of ways she probably felt that, you know, we didn't have a lot of things. So as soon as she had that opportunity, those are the types of things that she did. And, you know, and those are the types of things that I remember now at some of the sacrifices. I remember one last thing is that when she had a job and they promoted her boss's golfing buddy over her, she filed a grievance and she got the job. And it wasn't about self-identity then, it was about taking care of her family, making sure you had health care and other things. And those were the battles that she fought. And, but at times there were things crazy. I didn't understand, like, if I would leave my socks on the floor, she would blow a conniption. She'd run around the house and say, "You want to see a maniac? I'll show you a maniac!"
That's true.
And then...
I'm going to sing that song.
And then I remember her car getting stolen. And then I went to pick her up. And I was expected to see a maniac. And she was calm and cool as can be. And I was flabbergasted. I was like, someone stole your car. It's like, hello? And she said to me something I'll always remember, and this is the whole point of my long monologue here. And she said to me, she said, "I can't avoid someone stealing my car. You could certainly pick your socks up off the floor." And it's true. And so as time went on, I remember shortly before my marriage, my wife and, you know, we were in the car, my mother was talking to me about advice and things like that. And she said to me, and something that, if I leave you with this one thought, is that it's not the diamonds. It really isn't. It's not the diamonds, it's not the vacations, it's not the cars that make a good relationship. It really isn't. Although those things are important. I mean, it's really not going to fast buy a diamond ring or something. Those things are important. But it's the everyday things that matter. It's the everyday things, because those show you really care. Because those are things you have to face every day. And those are the things that make a good relationship and make a relationship last. It's those common courtesies every day. And that's certainly a standard that I idealize and may not live up to, but I try really hard. And I believe if you live your life in that way, and you're kind to the people around you, you take my mother's advice, someday when you're 80 years old, all your family will come together and wish you a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Mom.
Oh.